Good evening and welcome to the Politics Hub. We are live from Preston Prison. For the next hour, we're going to be investigating what is really going on in one of society's most invisible institutions, the prison system. A system many believe is in crisis, a crisis of overcrowding, of public confidence, and a crisis of safety, both inside and outside the prison walls. In the next week or so, the government will receive the findings of a review into sentencing, and then they have a big decision to make. If prison isn't working, should we send fewer people to jail? Well, I'll be asking the man who can change things, the Prisons Minister, James Timpson. But first, let's hear from the hard-working staff of Preston Prison, who opened their doors to us to show us what's really happening. The government is clear. Last summer, the prison system was dangerously close to collapse. The summer riots led to more than 1,280 arrests. Across England and Wales, the prison estate simply couldn't handle the load. Now, an independent review is looking at how sentencing needs to change to stop that happening again.
There was a basic failure, which is a failure to have enough prison places for the number of prisoners that were being sentenced to prison. That is about as basic a failure of government from the previous government as you could possibly have got.
For Keir Starmer, the former chief prosecutor, this is personal. He walked into a justice system in chaos. One of his first acts was to let prisoners out of jails that were full. And now the real question is, can this government succeed where others have failed? So we're here in Preston just before the sentencing review, and this is when we're going to really get a feel for how radical this government is prepared to be. Because look, the evidence shows that prisons are full and that custodial sentences, frankly, are not always working. But is that a political fight that they're willing to have? The polling shows the public still blame the previous Conservative administration for the issues in jails. But if Labour don't get a grip of some of these issues, and quickly, then it will become their problem. Often as a journalist, when you get access to a prison, you don't really get access to a prison, or it's one that's not really representative of the prison estate. But this is different, and I just want to show you why. So Preston is a Victorian prison. It was built in 1790. And frankly, like so many other prisons that have the same challenges, it's constantly on the brink of capacity, or even beyond capacity. Currently, overcrowding here is put at around 158%.
Prison overcrowding, it's not a new thing.
It's rough. This is a rough environment.
It's frustrating to see, and you feel bad for the prisoners because they're getting out with sort of nothing.
Something needs to be done, you know, we are overstretched, under-resourced.
Don't come back. Do not come back.
We're all here, we've all made a bad choice. It's about the choices that we make now that define us.
Tonight, we're going inside Preston Prison to get a sense of how bad things have got and ask what needs to happen next. Well, Molly Malone, I'm joined by now. She's been spent the past few months looking in depth at what is going on in our prison system. She's going to be with me throughout the hour. Molly, I'll be honest, the filming that I've done in Preston has had quite a big impact on me because, look, you look at these numbers, you know, I guess, removed from reality. You look at the statistics, you know that reoffending rates are high, you know that prisons are overcrowded, but when you come here and you realise it is basically the same people coming through the system again and again and again, and no government so far has managed to get a grip on it.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I've spent a disproportionate amount of time in prisons recently, and you know when, as a journalist, in any kind of environment, you're thinking, I'm going to have my wits about me, I need to listen to what they say and corroborate it and speak to other people. And actually, what you found in prison, in Preston Prison, is exactly what we found in Derbyshire, exactly what we see in Surrey. You hear time and time again that it's the same people coming in and being essentially the same person. They're not being rehabilitated, they're not really changing, and they're just on a kind of, as someone described it in your piece, a revolving dance floor, a revolving door.
Yeah, it does feel that way.
And it's a massive problem for the government.
And I guess my question is, you've got the sentencing review coming up. We've got a rough idea of what it's going to say. It's going to say that fewer people should go to prison. It's going to say that short sentences don't work because they don't give people time to rehabilitate. But politically, this is a hard issue, isn't it? It's always been a hard issue.
Yeah, and also because the dominant narrative for the last 2 decades has been prison works. People see that prison, think think that prison works, and actually that's what they're used to. They think it's the kind of easy option. That's what punishment should look like. And politician after politician, we heard Michael Howard say it in 1993, and then Tony Blair being tough on crime. It's what people are used to, but actually the government now say, probably because they realise that they have to, but they want things to change, but it's not going to be an easy sell to the public who are used to the kind of political narrative of the last 20 years.
Yeah, and it's the government and a number 10 that are very, very aware of public sentiment. I just wonder what will happen. Molly, thank you very much indeed. Molly Malone there. Well, a little bit earlier, I went inside one of the cells here where I spoke to Andrew. Now, Andrew's originally from Wigan. He told me about how he's been in and out of prison since he was 17. He's now 50. Now, a lot of the cells here have 2 prisoners staying in them, and that is because of the overcrowding issue that they're having to deal with every day here in Preston, like many other prisons. But when I spoke to him earlier, Andrew was on his own. You've got, obviously, bunk beds in here. Is this a cell that's meant to be shared for 2 people?
It was. My son was in here. As of this morning, he's gone. He's been transferred this morning, as of my son-in-law as well. They've been moved on.
How old's your son?
27.
Yeah. So he was in the top bunk?
He was on the top bunk, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a bit emotional, but yeah.
How long have you been sharing the cell before then?
He's been with me from day one.
Yeah.
So he was in Walton. From Walton, he came here. He was here a day, then I followed him on. And we've both been fortunate to land respected jobs in prison. We get a lot of lads. When they come in, it's the first time and their first experience. It's very daunting on them, you know what I mean? And I've been there. Yeah. I understand the way that they feel. My son was an example, his first time in prison.
Yeah.
So, in respects, he was lucky to have me there to guide him.
Yeah.
But in other respects of other people, they don't deserve to be in jail.
Yeah.
Some of them shouldn't be coming to prison. I see it outright. Day in, day out on this wing, and they should not be coming to prison.
Well, what kind of people are you talking about?
You're just talking to, in respects of people who are living on the streets and stuff like that. I mean, they're coming to prison because they've nowhere to live. Yeah. And it's rough. This is a rough environment, so you can imagine what it's like outside. It's not good.
Yeah.
So you're getting people who are just coming for speeding tickets and stuff like that. It is absolutely crazy.
You think you're looking at other people from vulnerable backgrounds, kids, and you think actually this is not working? Yeah,
of course, they shouldn't be in prison. Yeah. It needs to be addressed. The things that's happening now these days is they're not a person. They become a number when they're in prison, and it strips everything away from them. And once you've tasted prison, I've seen it day in, day out in here. They're coming back day in, day out. There was one guy who was let out on a Thursday, was back in Thursday night, the same day. So things need to get sorted in that respect. You know what I mean? People are getting recalled left, right and centre for stupid things.
What would you say to people who might be watching who have, quite a harsh view on criminals, who think, like, actually, if you are reoffending, then that's on you? What would you say to them from your own experience?
Don't come back.
Yeah. Do
not come back. Use your time. If you're going to come to prison, use your time wisely. And get out with something backing you up. It's a mug's game. Yeah. It is a mug's game, coming back to prison. I admit it. I've been there, I've done it, I'm here again. Yeah. And then my family don't like it, and I drag my son into it.
How do you feel about your son?
I love him to bits, my son, but like people said, he's old enough, he's 27-year-old, he can make his own decisions. But like I say, he's come in, he's used his time wisely, and yeah. So
it must be a bit lonely without him in the cell.
It's actually a bit of a moment of peace, to tell you the truth.
You've got a bit more room at least.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Well, we're going to really try and dig into some of the key issues this evening, and with us to do just that is the Prisons Minister, James Timpson. Thank you so much for coming with us here to Preston to really try. We're just trying to get under the skin of what is going on, and you are the person who could be able to change things. My first question to you, I guess, is the really obvious one. Do you think we're sending too many people to prison?
I think we need to build more prison places, and we are building more more prison places. But the problem is too many people are leaving prison, as you said, as you've seen here in Preston, and they're coming back again and again. 80% of offending is reoffending, so clearly something is going wrong. We inherited a justice system in a complete mess, and my job is to try and sort it with my colleagues, and so that is what I'm here to do.
You are someone who has got loads of experience working in prisons, on reoffending, on rehabilitation, and I'm listening to you, and you do sound, like any other minister that I could have interviewed, to be honest, over the last few years. Last year you said that we're addicted to sentencing. Many of the people in prison shouldn't be there. And you said a third of people in prison should definitely be there, another third in the middle that probably shouldn't be but needs some other state report. Then there's another third where prison is a disaster for them because it's just putting them back in the reoffending cycle. So I just asked you the first question again, it's not a trick question.
Yeah.
Do you think we're sending too many people to prison?
I think there are too many people going to prison who we could look at for other certain for low-level offending. We know, for example, if people go to prison for less than 12 months, they're far more likely to reoffend than people who have an electronic tag instead. So for certain offenders, I think we can get better results and have fewer victims if they don't go to prison. But we need to keep the public safe, and that's why you need prisons, and we need more prisons.
Can you give me a rough idea about how many people you think should be in prison? And there's currently like 88,000 people in prison now. As you know, the prison population has risen 93% over the last 30 years. Would you like to see 10,000 fewer prisoners in jails over the next few years?
Well, I'm really clear. We've inherited a complete mess in our prisons. And the reason why we need to build more prisons is because people are reoffending again and again and again. People are leaving places like HMP Preston here, addicted to drugs, nowhere to live, mental health problems, and that's why they keep coming back, and that's why we have more victims. So if we want to keep the public safe, we need to do a lot more of the work in here and in the community, but also we need to build more prisons.
I guess, I'm just kind of thinking that, listen to what you're saying there. We know that there's an overcrowding crisis at many prisons, including here in Preston. We know the reoffending rate is bad. We heard it from the officers there. They see the same people coming in again and again. So why are we building more prisons? Why, from that evidence, are we thinking that prison is working?
Because if you go back over the last 14 years, the previous government didn't build enough prison places, net 500. We've already got 2,400 new cells operating. But the real key is people are sentenced to much longer in prison, and people are reoffending more. And that is the reason why we need to build more prisons. As a prisons minister, my job is to make sure our prisons are really effective at reducing reoffending. So I've got a lot of work to do. We've
got the sentencing review coming up. It's a big moment for this government, right? Will you accept the recommendations?
Well, we need to wait till we see what the recommendations are. We've already heard some mood music of the direction they'll go. The thing I'm really pleased about is they're going to use something called evidence, which politicians a lot of time haven't used in the past. I'm a big fan of evidence. We need to follow the evidence that reduces reoffending so we get fewer victims.
What does the evidence say then?
Well, the evidence is mixed because for people who commit very dangerous, serious offences, prison is the right place and for a very long time. But for other people, if you take, for example, a number of female offenders, there are a lot of women in prison who are there for non-violent offences, and that's why we set up the Women's Justice Board to look at that. So for different offenders, there are better outcomes if we look at it in different ways.
So the evidence, as you say, is pretty clear, isn't it? That for certain non-violent offenders, prison is not the right place. You accept that?
Well, as long as we have punishment in the community instead. So we need to make sure that people are punished for what they've done wrong, but we also work with them so they don't commit crime again. They get a one-way ticket, not a return. And there are too many people. So, for example, the intensive supervision court we have in Birmingham is a fantastic example of how public services can work with an offender to help them turn their lives around. So they work with drug rehab, housing and so on. But if they don't turn up to the appointments, then they go back to prison. So there are some really good areas we need to look at, and I hope the review does that.
What would you say to the prisoner, we just heard from then? He's been in and out of jail throughout his whole adult life, I guess. He's seen his son share a cell, his son a first-time offender. How does that make you feel as prisons minister?
Well, it's not the first time I've seen a father and son in a prison cell. I've seen it a number of times, and it's a terrible thing to see. And, I've been coming to this prison for over 20 years. When I first was appointed minister, I spent 2 days shadowing an officer. And what was clear, he knew a lot of the prisoners coming in here. because they've been coming in for 15, 20 years. And that is a terrible situation to have. The reason why they're coming back is because they haven't got over the reasons why they're committing crime, and it's normally to do with drugs, mental health, nowhere to live. But we need to make sure prison is here for dangerous people, but we need to make sure people turn their lives around as well.
OK, stay with us, because we've got lots more to ask you throughout the programme. James Timpson there. Well, the governor here at HMP Preston is Dan Cooper. He started out as a prison officer over at HMP Leeds nearly 30 years ago, and he worked his way up through the system. So this, I guess, is a sense of how long this prison goes back to, right?
That's right, yes. This is a governor's roll board, as you can see, 1700s through to me in 2022 when I arrived.
Not sure how long your stunt life will last. I'll fill that one in later.
Absolutely.
So firstly, I just want to say thank you for the extraordinary access that you've given us. And just talk me through where we are now, then.
Of course, so we're on the Seaton Landing, HMP Preston, and on this landing we'll look after approximately 60 prisoners every day. Some of those will be remand prisoners, some will be convicted unsentenced, awaiting to be sentenced to court, and a small number will be sentenced, awaiting transfer on to other prisons.
And how much of a challenge is overcrowding in prisons?
Prison overcrowding, it's not a new thing. It's been around for a long time. But for us, we look after 680 prisoners, so up to 680 prisoners every day, and we're predominantly full. So that does bring challenges for us.
And if anything happens, like the riots or whatever, then there's no space in the system, basically. There's no capacity.
Our role as a reception prison, predominantly we will be full because we look after the courts of Lancashire and South Cumbria, so any activity that's taking place we will take in, but other events that can happen does put pressure on the wider system.
Yeah. And what would you say are the main sort of challenges for running a prison like this one?
I think the challenges, there's a number, I guess. We've got an incredible workforce here at HMP Preston, and you know, I'm very, very proud of the work they do, and keeping them motivated and keeping morale up is a really important part of it. Secondly, I guess we will look after 680, you're up to 680 men a day, but that can change through the week. So we might have up to 80 new prisoners coming into us. So what we do is try and actively get to know everyone who comes in, look after their individual risk factors, try and take care of them. We've got huge responsibilities, of course, to protect the public, and we take that very seriously.
A lot of people listening to this programme will say, look, the most important thing is if you've done a crime, you should be punished for it, and the public should be kept safe.
Sure. As an organisation, as a prison, protecting the public is hugely important. You know, we take that very seriously, and every one person who's committed to us, to our custody, we do our best to make sure that you know, we protect the public from them, and we protect victims. You know, it's hugely important. Whilst they're with us, we've also got responsibilities around reducing reoffending, because that person is going to come out, and actually we want them to be an active part of society, active part of our community.
And you must see the same people often, right? Coming back.
Yeah, we do. And then there's some, there's benefits in that for us because we know them, they know us, and we're constantly trying to get them back onto that journey of what does a job look like, what does life away from crime look like, and we do a lot of work with that.
It must be frustrating at times though as well.
Frustrating, yes, but we're very good in prisons. Tomorrow's another day. Things happen. Let's get on with it.
Can I just make an observation? You don't seem to me like the person I've got in my head who would be a prison governor. You're much more kind of softly spoken. You just don't fit the stereotype.
Thank you. I guess for me, my passion comes from being a prison officer, for wanting to make a difference for people. And I guess at every part of my journey through the leadership roles has been, I've seen an opportunity where I can make a difference for people. That really matters to me. That mission and sense of mission, and I think the staff at Preston have really got that, and that's why we have a lot of success with the people that look after.
It comes through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Cooper there, the governor here at Preston, speaking to me a little earlier. Now, you probably heard the beeping sound there at the end of the interview. Now, that was to tell us a prisoner in one of the cells nearby needed medical attention, and a member of staff was immediately sent to them. But look, it just gives you an idea of how busy things are here all of the time. Well, violence against prison staff is at a record high, according to the latest figures, and one alleged attack by the Southport killer, Axel Rudakabana, has provoked renewed political debates after the 18-year-old allegedly used a kettle to boil water and then pour it over an officer. The Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, raised the issue in Parliament earlier today.
This culture of appeasement, of protecting the rights of convicted terrorists and criminals, over the safety of our officers must end, and it must end now. If that means keeping them in cells with just a bed, so be it. If it means no contact, no privileges, and certainly no cups of tea, so be it. Let segregation truly and finally mean segregation. Because, Mr. Speaker, and I want to say this as clearly as I can, I'm warning the House now, if the government doesn't get a grip, a prison officer will be killed. Will be killed.
Robert Jenrick speaking there. Well, let's bring in James Timpson, Prisons Minister, again, shall we? What would you say to Robert Jenrick? There has been this idea of like supermax prisons for the most dangerous offenders.
Well, I think first thing is, as I said before, we inherited a complete mess in the prison system. Violence is up, assaults on staff is up, and our staff do an amazing job. They're the people that run towards danger rather than back away. And we're dealing with some of the most complex people in the country in a system which is, as you've seen today, really complex. But for me, we shouldn't rule anything out. What we need to do is to speak to our staff. They're the experts at dealing with these offenders day in, day out. And for what I've learned running a business for many years, and it's the same doing this job, speak to the people that do the job. They will tell us what needs to be done.
I'm interested you say don't rule anything out. Is it something that you would consider then, supermax jails?
Well, I think we should consider everything, but I think what we need to understand as well is that violence in prisons is too high. The number of people, when you have prisons that are so full, and the people in there are not going to education, going to personal activity, you get more violence, and that is totally unacceptable. Our staff turn up to work to help turn people. They want to turn people's lives around, as Dan, the governor, said. They didn't turn up to work to get assaulted. It's totally unacceptable.
And I guess I'm interested as well in your thoughts about drugs in prison, because look, every prison has got a drugs issue. I think that's probably fair enough to say that, right?
100%.
What should we do about drugs in jails? Because it's not even a case, as I understand it, of it being smuggled in now. It's about prisoners making drugs with what they have around them.
Well, you're completely right. Half of prisoners who arrive here in this prison and all the other prisons are addicted to drugs already. And then we put them in a prison with a number of serious organised criminals who make money out of addicted people. Yeah. And that's why you have the problem. And that leads to debt and violence in a prison. So it's one of my #1 priorities. Yeah. And serious organised crime is a serious problem for us.
Can I ask you, what's your take on the decriminalisation of drugs? Because as you say, I think it's like half of all offences are driven by drugs, it's estimated as. It's a huge organised crime network. What do you think about it?
Well,
this doesn't have to be government policy, by the way, it's just James the man. What do you think?
What I see doing this job is I don't just see people in prison, I meet victims too. And for me, my job is to make sure we have fewer victims. And so many people who we are dealing with in prison and probation have drug problems. So much of it comes down to drugs. So for me, I'm not, I think we should back the police and stop drugs in as many places as possible, because it
Good luck with that, it's gone well so far.
But it undermines what happens here. So many good things can happen here in a prison, but drugs is the #1 thing that undermines it.
At Preston, a few people mentioned to me an issue with recall. So people being sent back to prison for quite minor things, like a guy who his travel was delayed to an appointment, he phoned up, he tried to say his bus was late, but he still got recalled. He lost a job lined up as a result of that. And I looked at the stats, and it's pretty astonishing. People aren't necessarily being recalled to prison for committing crimes. 75% is for non-compliance. At a time when we've got a prisons, overcrowding crisis, is that right?
So we've got, you're right, 13,000 people are recalled back into prison, and 8 years ago it was half that. So the number of recalls has gone up substantially. And the priority of our probation staff is to protect the public, and it's their job to make decisions based on the evidence that they see whether someone is better to go back to prison or not. For me, the number is too high.
Missing a bus doesn't feel like it's...
Well, I don't know about this specific example, but often when I've seen examples like that have been sent to me, and when you actually read the whole story, that's not always everything that we will be looking at.
So it's something that you think should be considered then to try and bring that down, that number?
Yeah, I just think the number of people recalled is too high, and we need to address it.
Community sentences are often seen as a bit of a cushy option. It's the kind of thing that people do for their actual jobs, if they haven't committed crime. Do you think we need to make them tougher?
There are some people in this prison tonight that prefer to be in prison than doing a community sentence, but that's not everybody. Community sentences need to be tough punishments outside of prison. not just to help them address their offending behaviour, but also the victims need to see punishment's been done too. And for me, technology has a big part to play in the future. Electronic tags, GPS tags, and so on, so we know where everybody is. If I put an alcohol tag on you now, and you had 48 hours to go out, there's a 97% success rate on people not consuming alcohol when they have the tag on. So the technology's there, it's going to get better, but for a number of people, community sentences are tough, and they should be tough.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Stay with us, we'll have more from you. Well, we're here tonight in a men's prison, but it is fair to say the government's also made major reform of the system for women's offenders a central priority. Sky News has been given some rare access to a women's prison where the majority of inmates spend just months behind bars, and many of the women are serving time for non-violent crimes like shoplifting or minor drugs offences. Here's Molly Malone's report from Foston Hall Women's Prison in Derbyshire.
We're inside a women's prison in Derbyshire.
Good luck, because there's a soul here.
The government think many of those that are here shouldn't be. That prison isn't the best form of punishment for them. The majority are serving short sentences of less than 6 months.
I've not really had a very good life, so I've just been in and out of prison most of my life now.
This is Connie. She has 9 shoplifting convictions. Do you think you should be in prison?
To be quite honest, I steal from shops, so probably, yeah.
Do you think people should be in prison for theft?
It depends what kind of theft. Like, my kind of theft, I eat chocolate from shops and stuff like that.
At points, Connie's been homeless and addicted to drugs. Stuck, she says, in a cycle, with plenty of time in her cell to think. What have you left kind of on the outside? What's sort of going through your mind?
It's sad to say, really, because there's nothing really out there. I do have a son, he's 13, but I haven't seen him for many years now. I have no help whatsoever in how to approach and getting him back into my life.
Do you think about your son? I mean, do you miss him?
Yeah, all the time, definitely. I know this might sound harsh, but I think it's got to the point now I don't know what to miss about him, but I think about him every single day, of course I do, yeah.
On her way out of prison as we filmed, we met Tilat. She was prosecuted for smuggling in an item while visiting someone, also in prison. It was her first offence. She served less than 3 months.
Felt like a long time?
It felt like years, to be honest.
In her bags was a CV that Tilat had prepared for when she left, but she didn't seem hopeful.
When I came in, I had a job. I ain't got a job now. I was working in the NHS as a cleaner for 18 years.
Do you feel sort of supported? Do you feel stressed about?
The prisoners gave me enough support as possible, but the prison can't hold my hand outside. So when I'm outside, I'll have to hold my own hand.
On the outside, as they look to send fewer people to jail, politicians will be looking to places like this. A women's centre in Nottingham, where certain offenders can get counselling, free legal advice and help with employment or housing.
I think what happens when a man goes to prison is that there is usually a woman holding everything together. Usually when women are sent to prison, it's for short sentences. It's not a long enough time for anything productive to happen. It's just long enough to rip their entire lives apart.
The government has a prison overcrowding crisis. They want to both send fewer people to prison, but also clamp down on low-level crime. Conflicting challenges, and they'll need to take the public with them.
We'll be talking more to Molly later on in the programme as well. But let's just talk again to the Prisons Minister, shall we? We just saw there Molly's report from a women's prison. There are twice as many women in prison as there were 30 years ago. Are we looking up too many women?
One of our ambitions is to have fewer women in prison because so many of them there for non-violent offences. Half of them have children on the outside and the impact on the kids is huge. And also, I have personal experience with this because my parents are foster parents and I was brought up with a lot of very young babies whose mums were in prison. And too many of them then went on to commit crime and be in prison themselves. So we need to do more to prevent women going to prison for low-level, non-violent offences.
The point about the babies, I honestly find quite hard to get my head around. 53 babies born in prison last year, 50 babies received into mother and baby units last year. You say that you met some of these babies, fostered some of these babies. What kind of impact did it have on them in those key developmental stages?
I think there are some women with their babies who need to be in prison. They've done some really terrible things. But a lot of the babies that are there are not getting the normal life experiences a young baby should have. And we have examples where volunteers, fantastic volunteers, will go into a prison and take babies out, take them around to the supermarket for a couple of hours, just so they can get used to what normal life is like. And whilst the mother needs to be punished for what they've done, the baby in prison also gets punished too.
You see, this is the thing, isn't it? Because I do totally accept, and there'll be people throwing, at the TV here, because the polling shows that people don't want, two-tier justice, if you like, for mums or for women. But the babies are innocent. I just don't understand how, as a civilised society, we can have babies in prison.
Well, I went round prisons in Spain with David Gork as part of the sentencing review, and we went round prisons and there were a number of women there with their babies. That's what happens in the justice system.
Not everywhere around the world, though.
But we have a number of women who commit very serious offences, and we need their children with them. But from my experience, what we need to do is to make sure that for the low-level offences, the non-violent offences, the best place for a number of those women is not in prison, it's in the community being punished there.
Now, you're someone with real-world experience and clear passion for reoffending, for the prison system. Not someone with a massively political background. Now, in my experience, this can go one of two ways. You either get in there, you rip things up, you take on the establishment, you make real reforms, or you don't really know how the system works, you don't know what levers to pull, you get kind of strong-armed by the civil servants, you get, the politicians and number 10 putting pressure on you, and nothing really happens, and you often leave government. Which is it going to be?
Okay, well, first thing is, I think having experience of running a complex business is actually really helpful, because prisons and probation is really complex. So, but the next point is I think it was a bold decision to appoint me, but the reason why I wanted to do it is because we need to make bold decisions. We inherited an absolute mess, and it needs bold decisions.
Are you willing to make some enemies in order to do that, then?
I'm really passionate. I've been involved, I've been going around prisons and doing this for 20 years. This, to me, is like the dream job. And I am just, every day I'm working 15 hours a day, because so much needs to be done.
The reason I'm saying this is spending money on prisons, locking up fewer criminals, these are difficult sells politically. This is the number 10 who we know are very, very aware of where public sentiment is on things. They've got reform chomping at their heels as well. We saw Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, someone who spoke about racial injustices in the court system. A bad headline from the Daily Mail and a few unhelpful tweets from Robert Jenrick, and she suddenly, scrapped pre-sentencing reports for minorities. Is this the government that is prepared to get radical on reform?
We are getting radical on reform. We've got the David Gork review, which is coming out imminently. We've got the Brian Levison review into courts. We are building 14,000 prison places, and we are really focused on sorting this problem out.
OK. What's your message to the people in Preston who opened up their doors, who took a lot of risk, who let us film?
The staff here are fantastic. I was fortunate to spend 2 days here when I first started the job. We have amazing staff here. They do a very difficult job, but they do it very well.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for being with us on the programme this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. James Timpson there. Well, in Molly's report, we saw just shows the complex problems faced by many women offenders, but exclusive polling for Sky News by YouGov shows that the public is, on the whole, actually not that sympathetic to the case that women, like we just heard from, should be spared prison. Have a look at some of the numbers now, because our poll found that only around a third of people support sending fewer female offenders to prison, while around a half oppose it. It also found that around a quarter of people support converting some women's prisons into men's prisons, and 40% are against it. Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Molly Malone, shall we? Molly, I'm really interested to get some of your reflections. We've heard from the Minister, you've been doing a lot of work in a lot of these areas. What are your kind of key takeaways?
Well, I think what I found actually going into that prison in Derbyshire a couple of weeks ago, really interesting, was what the future could look like. So the government want to use these women's centres, which are a potential alternative to prison custody. So it's for people serving community sentences, but also people on probation. So that's their licence periods at the end of their prison sentence. They go there, they get free legal advice, they get free counselling, they get support with drugs and alcohol, things that perhaps might have sent them to prison, they would argue, in the first place. And what every single woman there said, please don't let it stop. We want this wraparound care to sort of continue. But what was difficult is that the woman that was running that women's centre saying the funding just isn't there, we're not set up for this, the framework's not there to scale this up. And I think that's probably what we're going to find across the board. I mean, you heard the Minister there talk about intensive supervision courts. This is something that they're piloting at the moment in places like Bristol and a women's intensive super court in Birmingham. And that's their kind of another idea kind of for the future. But there was a review at the beginning of this year that found again that these services, that's where basically a judge sort of monitors the progress of an offender and they check in with the court either weekly or fortnightly. And again, they're finding that the services are there, they're trying to kind of make it work, but they're just not sort of set up to make it work at the moment. And so if we send perhaps 10,000 less people to prison in the next few years, that's quite a quick turnaround for a system that really we're seeing is creaking at every single corner.
Does the polling surprise you, by the way?
Do you know what? It's really interesting because when I went into that women's prison, I was thinking, I'm just so interested to know, will people feel sorry for them? Will people think that they shouldn't be here? And actually, I didn't really have a proper sense of that. And I think maybe it doesn't surprise me, but I just think it shows what the issue is, because you need the public on side when it comes to kind of law and order. And if anything, you might perhaps think that the background of women, lots of them are victims of domestic abuse, half of them have children on the outside. The public might be a little bit more empathetic to their case, if not others. And actually, it seems that they don't want to fund these sort of community alternatives. They think prison works, and that's difficult.
Really, really interesting. Molly, thank you very much indeed. Molly Mullane speaking to us there. Well, you're watching a Politics Hub special live from Preston Prison. Coming up, we'll be taking a closer look at how prison reforms could affect the probation system and to examine the perspective of victims. We'll be joined by the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, that's Dame Nicole Jacobs. Hello and welcome back to this Politics Hub special. We are live from Preston Prison, really trying to get under the skin of the justice system. Because look, any reforms to the way prisons work has to go hand in glove with the shake-up to probation. And if fewer people are going to be sent to prison, well, that will just put additional pressure on a system that is already short of money and in many cases struggling to prevent reoffending. We've all heard of those awful cases of people who go on to commit crimes when they should be under the guise of the probation service. Well, let's find out what's going on. Our political correspondent Liz Bates has this report.
Wow. That one. Oh my God, you look like a totally different person. It's unbelievable.
That picture was took on the 28th of February 2023.
Charlie has transformed herself and her life. Compared to her time as a junkie shoplifter in Leeds, those are her words. After decades of being in and out of prison, court-ordered rehab last year changed everything.
I'm a prolific shoplifter, getting released homeless and that. All you do is go to trap houses, drug houses, and you're on that cycle again. It's just a continuous cycle, and that cycle needs to be broken.
And you said to me earlier that you feel grateful to the judge.
Yeah, definitely.
Why is that?
Because I wouldn't be where I am today if that man hadn't said, has this woman never been to rehab?
And you haven't offended since then? And you're putting your life kind of back together?
No, never offended, haven't offended, off methadone, off all drugs, got all my family back. You know, it's like, I got trusted to look after my great nieces and nephews. It's like, I couldn't even be trusted to be in the house.
She's getting support to keep her life on track here at this probation centre in Preston.
You couldn't see yourself as being anything other than a junkie shoplifter, but actually now you're a role model for other people, aren't you?
It's places like this that are at the heart of this government's approach to reducing crime and the prison population, with shorter sentences likely to give way to more community rehabilitation. Probation officer Bex believes this is the right approach.
Often the shorter sentences kind of disrupt people's lives. So, for example, people might lose housing because they've gone to prison, but then it's not really enough time for us to find more housing for them. I don't think people realise how much risk we're working with every day. And you're often hearing and reading about some really traumatic things, and then you have to go home at night and try and switch off. And yeah, the caseloads can be intense, but there's always hope that we'll get more staff, which will help a lot.
But more rehabilitation will require more government investment in these already overstretched services.
OK, so lads, what we're going to be doing today with the job, we're going to be moving the stone onto the paths up there.
Down the road, offenders are doing up this community garden. Luke, who runs the project, says this is far from the easy option.
We get some lads that, when they come on the first day, they actually say, oh, I wish I'd just been put in prison for a few months.
Why?
Yeah.
Why did they say that?
I'm not too sure, but maybe they think...
Because it's less work?
Yeah. So maybe they think it's a bit easier in prison.
Stephen first went to prison aged 20 for handling stolen goods, motorbikes.
So what was prison like?
Terrible, like the violence side of things, stuff like that.
Did you experience any of that?
Not myself, no, but I've seen things.
Yeah, like?
Yeah, things you don't want to see again anywhere.
Do you feel like this has helped?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So say you're late, but say you've got, do you have like a cut-off time, but if you turn up 1 minute late, you get sent home.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you've got to stick to your routine, you've got to be here on time, you've got to pull your backside out, do a bit of work, but it's good.
As the government cultivates a whole new approach to reducing crime, it's projects like this they're building their hopes on. Liz Bates, Sky News, Preston.
Liz Bates there. Now, I'm really aware that on the show we've been talking an awful lot about what to do with prisons and what to do with prisoners. But look, at the heart of most offences is a victim. And that victim is, of course, the most important. And so often they want to know that the person who offended against them won't do the same thing to them or to anyone else. So let's talk about victims now, shall we? We're joined now by the Domestic Abuse Commissioner for England and Wales, Dame Nicole Jacobs. Thank you so much for being with us on the programme this evening. Look, we've been talking about prisons, whether prisons works, whether we're sending too many people to jail. What's your point of view on this from a victim's perspective?
Well, thank you for saying that victims are the most important part, because we can certainly lose sight of them in all of these debates. And I think victims of domestic abuse in particular are paying a huge price for the prison overcrowding issue. We know that for some victims of domestic abuse, sadly, prison is the only respite that they will have when their offender is in prison, for them to seek support, to make plans for safety. Victims of domestic abuse, when their offender is in prison, will know that date of release and plan their life around it. So we have to really bake in from the very beginning of any reforms what the safeguarding is for victims of domestic abuse, where you've got that unique relationship where the offender and the victim are known to each other in such a way that it presents so much more increased risk. And we really have to keep that in mind. And I'm afraid that's not what's happening to date.
I'm really interested in you're saying that that's not what's happening to date. Can you just expand a little bit more on what you mean by that? What have we been seeing?
Well, all of the measures that we have that we typically think of are really effective to manage offenders in the community, whether that's tagging, restraining orders, those kinds of things are very well known to be inadequate for victims of domestic abuse. They are not measures that are routinely enforced, that are successful. So my issue with these reforms is that if we're going to do them, first of all, we have to ask a very important question. Do we have the safeguarding measures in place for victims of domestic abuse? I don't think we do yet. I don't know of a significant plan in place with the Ministry of Justice, with probation, which allows for this kind of capacity of support and monitoring of offenders in the community. And with domestic abuse, our minister said earlier, about reoffending. Perpetrators of domestic abuse are known reoffenders. It is a pattern of crime that happens over and over. We cannot have a plan in place to manage offenders in the community without having a very significant plan for how that will be done and how victims of domestic abuse will be made safe in that.
It's really interesting that, we shouldn't even be talking almost about releasing people from prison until we've worked out what we do with them in the community. Do you think that community orders are seen as, a bit of a cushy option?
I think they could be, and I don't. I'm not saying that it's always one or the other, because keep in mind, for offences of domestic abuse, that there's no such offence. It's a range of offences that are domestic abuse related. Could be common assault, could be stalking, could be coercive and controlling behaviour. That's another issue, is that we don't have a way that we're flagging these offences within our systems. So earlier this year, when we were releasing prisoners early, one of the big hiccups was not knowing which offences were the domestic abuse related offences. So there's a lot to do administratively that has a huge impact on victims in these reforms. There's much to do about the capacity of probation, the know-how and the understanding of what the kind of community oversight is adequate for victims of domestic abuse. And the question we must always ask ourselves, if you were a victim of domestic abuse and your offender is being managed in the community, how will you be assured that the measures that are put in place will be enforced? What happens if they're not? All of those kinds of things are left totally unanswered at this point. So yes, of course, MOJ has got to address some of the overcrowding issues, but where is the parallel program of work that is thinking and considering the view of the victim and making sure that that is baked in from the very start?
Do you think part of the issue, and if we accept that there is an overcrowding problem in prisons, do you think part of the issue is what crimes the whole system is prioritising? Because look, we know that crimes like stalking, crimes like domestic abuse haven't always been taken as seriously as they should by the system.
I think that's right. I think when we think about these wider reforms, one of the things that I've encouraged ministers and government to consider is we can't lump all crimes in our minds in one basket. We have to think about the crimes in particular where the offender is known to the victim and knows everything about that victim or knows quite a lot, where they live, who their family are, where they work, all of those kinds of things that are not the dynamic with other victims of crime. Not that of course, all victims of crime need consideration, but I suppose as the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, I have to say, we often lose sight of these crimes, which are so highly impactful for victims, where they're so worried, so concerned because of that nature of the relationship to, or former relationship to, the offender. And so we have to make sure that we understand that, and that has to be the thickest of threads through all of these reforms. We have a violence against women and girls strategy that is due to be published in the summer. My question is, for government, how are you addressing in spending review plans, in this strategy, how these reforms will make sense to victims?
It's a great question, and I'm so glad that we did this interview, because I'm very, very aware of, just talking about prisons, talking about prisoners, and actually we really need to talk about victims of crime too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, look, as we've seen tonight, this is a Victorian prison, and the site dates all the way back to the 18th century. Now, when I met Sophy Ridge, who's a custodial officer here earlier, she showed me around one part of the prison that I wasn't expecting to see. This is a garden built by the prisoners?
Yes, this is in our drugs recovery unit that we have here at Preston. It's part of the prison we're really proud of. It's a unit that consists of men that are wanting to engage in substance misuse recovery. They work closely with the uniform staff and the drug and alcohol team.
Yeah. It's really peaceful.
Yeah,
it feels peaceful.
It's really tranquil. It's definitely one of the quieter parts of the prison.
Yeah, I like quieter, but
yes.
yeah.
We use that word sparingly, yeah.
I was looking at some of the stats for the prison before I came, and the one that really jumped out to me was the number of under 21s who've been in care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say 9 out of 10 of the lads that we come across at some point in their lives have been in care. Certainly the under 25s.
The kids,
yeah,
basically.
The kids, yeah, they are kids. And you see prisoners coming in at 18, at first time in custody, not really got the wits about them. And you see how they get almost ingratiated in those groups.
Yeah.
And they come back, and then they're 19, and then they're 20, and then they're 21, and each time they're getting different, sometimes longer sentences. It's sad.
How does it make you feel?
It's sad when you build a rapport with a lot of them.
Yeah.
You do. I think there's a general misunderstanding of what a prison officer does. We don't just lock doors. We're agony ants. We're sometimes firefighters, nurses, carers for some of them. It's definitely
a lot.
Yes, yeah.
Sophie speaking to me there about her experience working in Preston Prison. Well, I found the final voice we're going to hear from tonight in F Wing, which is a drug-free wing here at Preston. His name is Nico, he's 31, he's from Blackburn.
This wing's like a drug-free wing, so we have mandatory drug tests on here, where you have to have a drug test twice a month, and if you fail that drug test, which nobody really does, it's a privileged wing, you get taken off the wing.
So a privileged wing means you want to be here. People want to be here. And why do you want to be on this wing?
Well, there's only 33 places on this wing, and your doors open more than when you're on another wing.
So you can go out of your cell more, basically.
Yeah, we've got a nice little bit. We've got TVs on the wall here.
Yeah.
We've got a ping pong table upstairs. We've got air fryers, which they're few and far between in jail. So we'll have a curry on the weekend. You can make omelettes, healthy eating, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's just the hustle bustle on the other wings. Like the thing is with this jail, it's got not children, but YOs and adults mixed, which a lot of jails have to now.
And YO's a young offender, is it?
Yeah, YOs are young offenders, which a lot of jails have to due to the overcrowding.
Yeah.
But over on this wing, you'll find it's mostly people who just want to get their time done.
Yeah.
Like instead of the loud screaming out the doors and things like that, these are just people that want to have a nice, quiet time as much as you can while you're in jail.
What would you say to people who might be watching and think, you know what, if you've done something wrong, then they haven't got sympathy?
I'm under no illusions that I've not done something wrong to be here. I've done something wrong to be here, but it's not about the choices that we've made in the past. We're all here, we've all made a bad choice. It's about the choices that we make now that define us. When I come to jail this time, and to hear the effect it had had on my family, and my little girl especially, 6 years old nearly, our relationship special, and to hear some of the stuff that she come out with, like on Mother's Day, she said to her mum, "What's Mother's Day?" She said, "Oh, it's when we celebrate Mum." Said, "Oh, well, what about Daddy?" Said, "Yeah, there's a Daddy's Day as well." Said, "But I don't have a daddy anymore." Things like that, they break your heart, do you know what I mean? And I will never, ever, ever make the same choices that I made to be here now. Like, I'm not a violent person, I've not been known for violence, I've been known for drugs, I'll be honest with you, with drugs.
But now you're on the drug-free ring, right?
For drugs, and no amount of money in the world is worth putting your family through what I put my family through. I will tell you that now. No amount of money in the world, and I'll never make the same choices what I've made.
I believe you.
I just regret that I've made them this time.
I believe you when I listen to you. I really do.
Thank you.
You know, 6 kids, and you've got a fiancé who's stuck with you as well.
Yeah. I'm lucky.
Well, let's just get some final thoughts, shall we, from Molly. I mean, just talking to the prisoners was something that has really stayed with me, actually, because both of those guys I spoke to today, Andrew and Nico, they both accepted that they've done something wrong, that they should be in prison. And I guess this is the complexity of all, isn't it? You know, people who know that they're not doing the right thing, that they are committing crimes, and yet they're still in this cycle.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think for kind of proper, meaningful reform, actually, the government need to have quite a serious conversation about the types of people that we don't send to prison, because in the public's view, lots of these people are criminals. They've done things that are wrong, and actually the kind of potentially slightly easier things, like the scrapping of certain short sentences, perhaps not sending some women to prison, that is going to buy you hundreds of spaces. It is not going to buy you thousands of spaces, which is what they realistically need to do.
Thank you so much indeed. Well, that is all from Preston Prison. Now, look, honestly, it has been a real eye-opener for me, and it's only now that I've realised something that's been puzzling me. You know, why have the staff at Preston Prison let me in? Why have they talked about the challenges they face so openly? And I guess it's because they want the public to know. They want people to know about the reality they're dealing with on the ground, and that something needs to change. Now, this is a good prison, but it's not immune to the challenges that all prisons face. And now it really is over to the government. It's difficult. Are the reforms going to happen? I'll see you tomorrow at 7.